latest edition of IRC. We'd also like to encourage you to visit our website, which is www.cesa.co.za, to get all the information with regards to CESA's news, events, and webinars, and other courses that you could, short courses that you can take under CESA. And lastly, please like and follow or subscribe on our various social media pages to interact with us and to keep up to date with regards to all our news and events. With that being said, I'd like to hand over to Mr. Chris Campbell, who will deliver the CESA message, which is labeled a call to service. Over to you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you very much, Avuile, for that introduction. So let me start by saying good day, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, colleagues. Thank you for joining us for this presidential address. Interestingly, the last one for the year, as we've done the same throughout the country for our various branches. And in the words of our president, he certainly was considers it a privilege to be serving in his capacity as president for 2022 and 2023. So to kick off, I want to take us slightly back in time by sharing with you that, and for those of us who don't recall, on the 15th of May 2004, in Zurich, FIFA announced our country as the host country for the 2010 World Cup. This single announcement created hope and excitement within our nation and our people. What a moment that gave birth to working together as a nation to signify the fact that we can do anything. If we can go to the video, in my projection room, please. So it would appear that there's some technical problems, unfortunately so. Let's give them a few more seconds and see if they can flight the video. That's the one that you need to go to the previous one, colleagues. Okay, I think let's scan the video. I'm going to mimic the video for you, curious audience. So in this video clip, what we've tried to share with you, which seems now to be failing us, is Mr. Sepp Blatter in 2004 opening up an envelope and announcing, I'll try to do it in his voice, the host for the 2010 World Cup is South Africa. And indeed, that was a moment of great joy and great hope. Let's see.
The 2010 FIFA World Cup will be organized in South Africa.
So indeed, then, with the common goal of hosting the world and creating a spectacular event. Not to mention the immense focus on building decent infrastructure in the form of stadiums and upgrading roads and the like. Hope was brought about, and it brought about the entire state machinery and the nation to have a purpose for us to show what we can do. Now, if we go to 2010, in fact, when the first game as the host nation was played, on that very day, the 11th of June, 2010, in the opening game between South Africa and Mexico, the country hopes were raised to a very different height. And
it's a really good ball. It's Shabalala. Goal! Bafana!
So indeed, that goal ignited hope and ensured that we can do it. Now, if we were to able to ignite the hope in our people in 2010 and have worked towards that common goal, then the floods floods in our provinces and should once again have ignited in us a similar passion to work together and rebuild that infrastructure. When doing so, of course, we need to maximize value and do better with the little resources we have, emerging stronger than we did before. As engineers, let us show you what we can do to ensure that we protect the health and safety of our people by incorporating resilience, reliability, and value for money into the infrastructure we develop. We can be hopeful again that we are able and available to make a difference and build our nation once more. We have the ability to rewrite the gloomy narrative which has dominated our lives in recent years, the pandemic, flood. We can overcome, we can recover. But we have a lot of work to do. As an industry, therefore, we need to ask ourselves, where do we even begin? In contemplating the presidential theme for this year, it became immediately apparent that whatever goals we seek to achieve, whatever message we want to convey, and whatever progress we want to make are all underpinned not by the what, but by the how. We know what needs to be done to move our industry and our country forward. It's the way we go about doing it which will define our success. And it was with this in mind that the focus this year was on a team concept, T-E-A-M. Together, each achieving more. The success of any group of people is completely dependent on working together as a team, being on the same page with a united outlook. Indeed, Ubuntu, a CESA Ubuntu. To meet CESA's mandate to execute our strategic plans and to face the challenges of our industry together, the theme for 2022 was titled Call to Service. The time has, of course, come for us all to get involved in contributing to the economic recovery of our country, and to get all hands on deck. This theme resonates all the more with the crisis being faced, particularly in your own cities and your own province at this time. We have, as a start, reaffirmed our 6 key focus areas in our strategic plan as being ones we would, as an organization, maintain for the next few years. And in case you're not familiar with these, let me take the opportunity to briefly share these with you. Firstly, we talk about proactive, targeted, effective and constructive engagement with all relevant stakeholders, actively influencing procurement policies and practices to ensure best practice in infrastructure procurement, strengthen and reposition the brand of CESA as the champion of consulting engineering excellence, promote continuous improvement in transformation and inclusivity in the consulting engineering sector, deliver value add to members and stakeholders, and last but not least, uphold the integrity of the consulting engineering sector. These focus areas, of course, respond to industry challenges, which we have become all too familiar with, and which are reflected in feedback from you, our members, both directly and through our recent biannual economic and capacity surveys, BECS as we call it. Examples of the success we have achieved in this regard, of course, can also be seen in the amounts of queries and referrals for advisory services that we receive on a monthly basis. But I'd like to take us to the heart of the matter, and that is, what will it take for us to be of service? So, referring to the theme of a call to service, we believe it's important to unpack what this really means. So generally, the dictionary definition is service is the action of helping or doing work for someone. Most relevant to CESA, of course, it can also be defined as the system of supplying a public need, or rather contributing to the supply of public and economic infrastructure to serve our nation. We believe that consulting engineers are indeed servants. We are responsible for ensuring the quality and integrity of much social infrastructure, and are called to protect lives and the livelihoods of our people, whilst at the same time contributing actively to ensuring that economic infrastructure is designed and built affordably and sustainably. Now, we'd like to believe that being called to service should come naturally to all of our members, but we know that everyone's juggling priorities in today's busy times, especially with the advent of social media and information coming at you faster than what we can process. But in order to achieve the aforementioned objectives around responding to a call to service, we believe there are 4 requirements which we should all be thinking about and working on. The first one is availability. Of course, there's not enough hours in the day. We need to manage our time and we need to make ourselves available and set aside some of the time for these kinds of activities. There has to be a willingness. There's nobody there to force you or coerce you. And the question is, are you willing? And the next one is sacrifice. Of course, there are tough decisions to make. And often one has to opt for what us engineers call a compromise solution. Question is, are you ready to go out of your way? And then lastly, vision. In this respect, we believe that it's important to keep your eye on the end goal. What are we aspiring to achieve? Because these are arguably not things that are going to materialize in overnight or one day. They could take quite a long time, a few years, and likely even could be part of your legacy. Do you have a vision for the future? That's the question. Importantly, of course, we believe that leading by example is the hallmark of great service. Talking the talk and walking the walk with integrity and excellence. Successfully working in service for this public need will greatly aid in achieving our goals and motivating our industry, which at this point in time, in many quarters, you may find many lamenting the hardships that they may be experiencing. It is now time for engineers to be more proactively contributing to South Africa's rebuild project. We need everyone to become involved in ensuring that we make our economic recovery plan a reality, whilst contributing to enhancing all of the efforts being made towards as many of the goals contained in the UN Sustainable Goals adopted in 2015, all of which are most pertinently applicable to the challenges we face in our own country. We must actively and effectively advocate and communicate with decision makers. We must continue to advocate for quality, cost-based selection and value for money, which builds on our transformation and inclusivity journey. And our member firms have to be committed to ensuring that every available project budget allocation for a specific project is optimally utilized to ensure that we support maximizing the benefit for society. CESA is called to service. In our act of service, CESA looks forward to fostering continued engagement and partnerships for the remainder of this year. But it doesn't end there. It's a continuous journey. We will continue to make a strong case for the public sector to meaningfully partner with the private sector to ensure that we have better outcomes in respect of our infrastructure development programs, as well as utilize private sector capacity and expertise to supplement the limited capacity that is available in the public sector. In this vein, I share with you that we have continued to make strides in our focused stakeholder consultations with the public sector, entities such as National Treasury, SANRAL, Department of Water and Sanitation, Development Bank, to name but a few, come to mind. We too continue to play a pivotal role in many business organizations, such as Business Unity South Africa and industry-specific organizations such as Construction Alliance of South Africa and Built Environment Professions of South Africa. And indeed, we remain hopeful. I think the expression, the glass remains half full, is the perspective. So in conclusion, I would like to reiterate that CESA is committed to acting in service of our industry and our country, to protect lives and livelihoods, and to encourage others to do the same. I call on you, therefore, to be available to make a difference and leave a long-lasting legacy for future generations. Indeed, together, achieving more. God bless our industry and our nation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell, for those wise words. And in his absence, we'd also like to thank Engineer Olu Solwate for those words. And it's truly inspiring, to have leaders such as yourself to, to encourage us and to call on us to actually make a difference within our industry from a consulting engineering perspective. So we truly appreciate that, and I hope that everyone in attendance, particularly our fellow CESA members, would heed to that call and try to contribute as much as is practically possible. So thank you once again. Without further ado, we'll move over to our first guest speaker, Mr. Keegan Duval. So again, just to give you a brief background on Keegan while he sets up his presentation. Keegan is he's basically a representative from the Western Cape government, from the Department of Transport and Public Works in the roads branch, although he's currently acting as the chief engineer in construction and maintenance. Keegan currently has a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Cape Town and is a registered professional engineer with the Engineering Council of South Africa since November 2015. Keegan's also a product of the Western Cape government's public works subversary, Masaki CESA, between 2007 and 2010. He's also gone through the graduate development program from 2011 to 2015, and is also a product of the Roads Graduate Professional Development Program, also under the Western Cape government. He's also has relative experience within the private sector, both as a contractor as well as a consultant, and more specifically within the roads industry within the Western Cape, before becoming a public servant with the Western Cape government in late 2015. He's currently, as I've mentioned, he's currently the acting chief engineer within the roads contracts division, where he is responsible for the management and implementation of various roads projects, from design reviews to handover to documentation, procurement, and construction management. Keegan's also passionate about mentoring and transformation, as he is a product of the province's development opportunities. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Mr. Duval. Yes, let's hear from him. Thank you very much, sir. Over to you.
Apologies, some technical difficulty there, trying to unmute myself. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity and for the invitation from CESA. I was firstly a bit shell-shocked to receive such an honor, so thanks and gratitude, and also for the opportunity to address you, and more importantly, for us to engage. Thank you for that good opening address there, Mr. Campbell. I just made some notes here on my end of things that just stood out for me from it. Value for money, resilience, reliability, teamwork, excellence, connectivity, quality-based selection, and the procurement risk. But I think a key thing that I take out of that address is our ability to show leadership as an engineering industry to resolve the issues of the South African society at large. I am in a public gathering, if those who cannot see that. So I apologize for any background noise that you may be picking up there. Trust that you can bear with me on that. Okay. Just a quick outline of the presentation. I thought it was important to provide some introduction and context first of the roads branch. I don't know whether many of the audience is aware of us or learned in terms of how we run our operations. So I'll give some context there. Our panelists have already mentioned the CESA 2022 infrastructure report card. I'm going to zoom in particularly to the road space and see what opportunities we can get from there. And that's the next point, the opportunities, what opportunities exist for consulting engineers. Then back to basic sort of approach of what is the code of conduct for registered professionals? What are we ensuring to do? And then some questions and comments, and then thanks and closing from me. So firstly, what is the purpose of the Department of Transport and Public Works? Well, firstly, we are a provincial entity and road authority. And in short, it is to deliver and maintain transport infrastructure that is sustainable, integrated, and environmentally sensitive, that supports and facilitates the social empowerment and economic growth and promotes accessibility and the safe, affordable movement of people, goods, and services. That's quite a mouthful. So let's unpack that a bit. And I've used our core values to do that, which is summarized there with that graphic. It is, do we care about who we serve and who we work with? I think the human factor is often forgotten in these trying times. Are we competent? Do we have the ability and the capacity to do the job we are employed for? How accountable are we? Do we do our job with integrity? Do we look for opportunities to innovate? And then from a citizen-centric sort of approach, are we responsive to the needs of citizens and employees? So that's the department. Then I'm zooming to the roads branch itself, which I've shortened to WCG Roads. So the roads branch is responsible for the management of the proclaimed provincial road network in the Western Cape province of the Republic of South Africa, and that consists of both paved surface roads and the unpaved gravel road networks. Just in terms of numbers, our paved road network is about 25,000 kilometers, and our unpaved network is in the region of 48,000, nearly double that. So as the branch, how do we manage and how do we meet that broad statement and purpose? And there are two main focus areas. The first one is to construct, rehabilitate, and maintain the provincial road network. And the second one, in the second bullet point there involved, is offer graduate training towards meeting professional registration requirements with CESA. And as you heard in the introduction, I am a product of that commitment and investment in what used to be youth. Maybe I still classify. So to go back to the first point, how do we construct, rehabilitate, and maintain the provincial road network? First point there is the implementation of a road asset management plan with ongoing assessments to ensure roads are safe and reliable. We aim to put in a minimum of 11 construction and maintenance projects completed every year. Just a general context there is in Chief Director Road Contracts, our annual budget is about 2.5 billion. We run about 85 projects actively during several stages in construction. And then also appropriate public signage and information available and improved road safety and operation. So while it's important to maintain the network with the connectivity and the social media presence, we also need to make sure that as people use the road network, they get the necessary information to spark off secondary indirect economic opportunities. Then the second point, and this is a medium to long-term process, is to offer graduate training towards meeting professional registration. So that is the placement of graduates. We leverage off several private sector relationships, firstly with contractors and with consultants, to give our young aspiring graduates opportunities to get the necessary skills. So our sound working relationship with CESA and your affiliates is very important to meeting the overall objective of what the branch tries to do. Then assist candidates with professional registration processes through guidance and suitable placement in engineering consultancies. Then in terms of the makeup of the branch went through a 12-year reorganization process. And that was finally concluded in 2019, just before COVID struck us. And I just took this extract to show you in short what the structure of the branch is like. Firstly, the purpose is to manage the provincial road network, which I've referred to in previous slides, and there are 5 main functions there, which are served through the 5 chief directorates indicated at the bottom of your screen. So the first is to ensure the development and maintenance of institutional strategies and systems for roads program, asset management, and transversal operations. So one thing we are very proud of as a branch is that we understand our network, we understand the condition it's in, and in that way we can lead planning and long-term interventions and not just be, addressing maintenance backlogs in a reactive manner. Second point is to ensure the optimal functioning of the road network through appropriate management of present network and planning of future needs. So our presence in district municipalities and local municipalities is a critical part here to understand their developmental needs and how the provincial rural network can facilitate that. Point 3 is to ensure the optimal design of road infrastructure, both through outsourcing and in-house practices, and that is undertaken in terms of appropriate standards. Our DDG is very proud of the fact that we are a learned client. We understand our business. We can give effect and guidance to our service providers. And I'm sure most consultants in the Western Cape who've worked with us will be able to confirm that. Point 4 is to ensure the outsourcing of road construction and maintenance contracts is undertaken in terms of relevant legislation, departmental strategies, and specifications. We've all heard in the news the sort of SANRAL procurement difficulties that they've had. We're quite special in how we deal with that and the support we get from our provincial parliament. Point 5, ensure the provision of in-house civil and mechanical engineering operations is optimally undertaken in terms of relevant legislation and departmental strategies. So those 5 main functions, they are done through the chief directorates. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'll mention them. Road program management, they look after project management over the long term, the medium term expenditure framework, 3 to 8 years. Chief Director of Road Planning, they look at investment corridors, roads rights issues, access development approvals, working with local and district municipalities. Then we have Chief Director of Road Design. They are our technical hub, geometric structures, materials, learned people who get to understand the technicalities and also are very critical in the development of COTO and new specifications through a liaison with the National Department of Transport. And then where I'm housed is Chief Director of Road Contracts, and we take a design, prepare it for documentation, manage the construction, and close out. And then last is Chief Director of Road Departmental Operations, which is what I call the yellow fleet, which is our in-house mechanical and maintenance division. So I got this opportunity through a very special and proud award that we received at the 50th CESA Aon Engineering Awards, which was the Visionary Client of the Year award. That was issued to us on the 28th of September in a nice gala event in Sandton. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend myself, but from the plaudits I've heard from my colleagues, it was quite an event. This is an important moment for us because it's a recognition from an accredited body of our efforts as Western Cape Government Roads and as the department to strive for excellence in service delivery as a government organization within an ever-changing world and society. So your ability to be flexible and to adjust and be agile real time is where the key business happens. I've provided a URL link there for those who would like to get some further details about that. Mr. Chair, I'm sure you'll pass on the presentation to those who are present. And then in my preparation for the presentation, just important to highlight the criteria that was used for that two orders. It sets the tone for our discussions today. So quality of engineering design, ingenuity, originality, and innovation. I'll go further down as to unusual construction methods, influence of consulting engineer, conceptual design, complexity and sophistication, and the responsibility carried by consulting engineers in how we do our work. And then perhaps most importantly these days, environmental, social, and economic sustainability of it. Just to pause, in my experience in the construction space, that it's technicalities or the ability to have technical competence is critical, and we should always strive to have that. But we need to evolve and move to the next phase where many jobs are held up through social issues. So it doesn't matter how good the technical specifications is, if you cannot engage with the communities and make them part of the process, make them feel part of it, then you get holds-ups and delays. The reports on construction mafia, and that itself is well researched, so I won't go into further detail there. So just to set the tone and ask some interesting questions, I thought the timing of the release of the 2022 infrastructure report card is quite interesting. I just put the grading definitions there from A, B, C, D to E, which is from world-class through to unfit for purpose. For the road space, and I must just note there, the extracts taken there from pages 6 and 9 of the document. SANRAL has done a lot of good work, and so we look at the first section of the national roads that is in a B+ category. The paved provincial roads, that is at D. The paved roads in the major urban areas is at D. Other municipalities paved roads is at D-, and the provincial and municipal unpaved roads is at E. So from a roads infrastructure perspective, besides our major links which SANRAL manages, they have their challenges as well. In a whole in South Africa, we're at the risk of the roads industry failing, and that will have many knock-on effects to the rest of the economy. So from that, we've got a sense of how disastrous it is, what opportunities then exist for consulting engineers to offer services here. And I look at page 33 of the report, and I just extracted some key findings that the report had made. I'll run through them. There is no reliable database of the links and ownership of roads and reliable condition assessment records. So in other words, the state doesn't know what they own. They don't know how far. They don't know what condition that's in. So that is a key matter in the state leading the way in infrastructure investment. How can you plan for things if you do not know the current state? Then there's a limited capacity of the majority of roads authorities. As I said in the opening address, Western Cape Government Roads is quite special in that regard, is that we're probably 80+ strong in terms of the amount of people we have, most being professionally registered. Then the prioritization of road expenditure and its uniformity and standardization in terms of reporting. So our greatest struggle is our maintenance backlog requirements per year is probably in the region of 1.2 billion, while our routine road maintenance budget is only around 150 million. So how do we find smart, innovative ways to do less with more? Then we need greater policy clarity, which is required for prioritizing expenditure and the methodology for estimation of economic significance. So our key strategy of why our road network is in a very good condition is that we manage our funds through traveled kilometers. So the more vehicles ride over a particular road, the more investment that gets. That obviously in the long term can pose another risk, because what happens about our poorer, less affluent areas which do not have vehicles? What happens to that where the road network is not economic? And this is often a big internal debate amongst our colleagues. And the example I used is that in the good old days, excuse the pun, to go and build the Shishen line is a government-funded process that did not have a return on investment until many years later. So as the state, we need to get better funding but we also need to do our work in areas which are not of economic, which do not have an economic return. We aren't driven by the profit motive as companies in the private sector are. Then the widespread overloading of roads and poor stormwater management, weighbridges, the importance thereof, axle loads, and that has a bigger safety risk in terms of the fatal accidents we have on our roads and the value of law enforcement. And then the gravel road network, which is too extensive, and the budget is too constrained for the entire network to be kept in a satisfactory condition. In terms of the Western Cape itself, our gravel road network is quite critical because the agricultural sector makes up about 50% of our economy and GDP for the year. So what's the point of a citrus farmer in Ceres setting up if he has a 30-kilometer gravel road, and by the time he gets his vehicle to market, the oranges are bruised or damaged? So we can wrap our heads about it during the comments and general discussions about what opportunities exist from that very sorry state of affairs. We should be alarming to all of us, but I get the appeal is, so what? What do we do about it? How, as Mr. Campbell raised earlier. And I thought to come back to basics for me myself is, why do I do what I do? Why am I a public servant? That's a professional. What's my purpose in my work life? And the code of conduct is a very important thing for me to just remind myself of why I do what I do. So the code of conduct, as per the Engineering Professions Act, is we need to apply our knowledge and skills in the interests of the public and the environment. So when you say the public, is that a populist opinion? Is that we know better and the public should just follow suit? How do we raise awareness, particularly in the space where everyone has access to information? It's almost on a weekly basis where I have a local in the various areas that knows roads construction better than me. How do we address those aspects? We got to execute our work with integrity and in accordance with generally accepted norms of professional conduct. We got to respect the interests of the public and honor the standing of the profession. We got to strive to improve professional skills and those of our subordinates. We need to encourage excellence with the engineering profession, and we do not prejudice public health and safety. So these are all very good things to hold, but for me, the key thing is, how do we make that sustainable from a profitability aspect? State capture and those things have taught us that making money for money's sake is no longer tolerable in society. But the counter of that is, in order to sustain businesses and see it grow, there needs to be an acceptable level of profitability. And that comes down to the clarity that us as client engineers often need to provide certainty for the private sector to plan accordingly. So that's the gist. I was limited to 10 minutes, so I couldn't unpack and go a bit further. But Mr. Chair, I don't know if you'd like to take questions and comments now. I'm welcome to address it, or whether you want to reserve that for a little bit later.
Hi, Mr. Duval. Yes, we'll address those later once all the speakers have presented. And yeah, again, to our attendees, to please write your questions in the Q&A box so that we can get to them when we have our general discussions and comments. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. And then just in closing, those are my contact details. If anyone would like to just start up a conversation. I think the beauty of these virtual connections, and you can see I'm in Mossel Bay running away from a site meeting right now, is that our ability to connect with each other is much easier than say 5 years ago. So thank you for my employer. I gotta pay my bills and thank them for the opportunity to do what I do. Despite the challenges, it is a fantastic place to work. I'm enthused and encouraged by my work, and I'm wondering what more can I do to be of service, and to honor the call of this year is a call to service. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duval. Yes, truly, it's truly wonderful to see the great work that the Western Cape Department of Transport and Roads Department of Transport and Public Works is doing, particularly in your division in roads. Really great and encouraging to see, that your department is really truly devoted to, maintaining or trying to reach a high standard for your roads infrastructure. Without further ado, I'd also like to present to you now for the last guest speaker for today, Mr. Tumambande. Just to give you his brief bio, he is currently the Executive Manager for Business Development at the Kucha Development Corporation. Mr. Tuma has a BSc in Civil Engineering from the University of Witwatersrand, as well as an MSc in Engineering, also from Wits. He also has an MBS, Masters in Business Science from CESA, as well as a MSc in Financial Management from the London University. His vast experience cuts across civil engineering, environmental management, and he has operated in various positions in management, which include being a project manager, a program manager, program director, and an executive manager. He has been called upon by both the national and provincial governments to assist with his experience, where there are great challenges with regards to infrastructure rollout and in conceptualizing key programs. He has published both nationally and provincially. Sorry, I just lost my place again. And he has played a key role in the expansion of Kucha, in assisting various provinces and national departments, resulting in being involved in such iconic projects such as Robben Island and the buildings. He's led a team which consisted of the Construction Industry Development Board, CDC, Kucha Development Corporation, and the Department of Public Works that has conceptualized and designed the specification for social and economic deliverables in construction works contracts. Mr. Mbande has conceptualized the current business case and proposed a funding model for the eradication of mud structures in schools. That led to the development of the current national program, which is called the Accelerated School Infrastructure Development Initiative, abbreviated ACIDI, which is currently implemented nationally. So without further ado, Mr. Mbande, we hand over to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. I highly appreciate the invitation by CESA. When we got this invitation, obviously we didn't know where to start. Up until I called Godfrey to have a context on an understanding of what needs to happen. He shared some of the information that we are, the consulting firms are battling and are struggling, and some are closing. We then felt that we do need to also share our story, because we depend on the same source of work, which is government, largely government, to make or to earn our fees. So the sharing is going to be the sharing of the story on how we are trying to get there. We're not there yet, as well as to point out some areas where there can be collaboration. With the economy growing at 1%, it is important, therefore, that we plan ahead in terms of our own sustainability as an industry. Kucha is part and parcel of the industry. So I'll cover the purpose, the Kucha scope of work, not necessarily the legislated one, which is a mandate, the South African economic strategy, which is a key driver in how we do things and how we look at the headwinds so as to adjust our sales. I will also talk about the government fiscus, largely the Eastern Cape and Western Cape, the legislative governance and implementation challenges that could point us to perhaps where we could collaborate before conclusions and closure. Chair, from a purpose perspective, we just want to share experience since that includes diversification, and then the government approach on infrastructure, which at the moment hinges on 3 legs. That is the social infrastructure through the fiscus, the debt grant approach based on bankable plans. That is where the whole world is going. The concessions through ports and mega projects. Some of you might have seen the advertisement by Transnet on building the South African airport and rail. Just to jump into Kocha scope of work. What is our scope of work? I'm talking about the adjusted approach. We've got a mandate. Our mandate is to ensure FDI attraction in South Africa through the special economic zone. However, for survival, that mandate is call it an unfunded mandate, in that we do not get grants, or if we do get grants, they are a trickle compared to what is the need. So therefore, we had to quickly say, how do we survive? So in terms of what we do, we've got ship-based activities, that is bunkering and maritime services. We've got shares in some ships, and we've got a boat so that we can feed or rather give services to the passing ships along the coast. We've got 800 kilometers of the shoreline. Initially, I must say, our desire is still to have our own ship, because once you've got a ship, therefore you can take so many South African kids that are unemployed in that ship, but also there is so much that needs to be done in terms of moving goods and services. And we also have got land-based activities. In terms of land-based activities, we're managing the CESA special economic zone, which is Kocha, and then also through government, they've given us to conceptualize and implement the Wild Coast SEZ, which is based in Umtata. Then we also have got non-SEZ activities. We're managing the Nelson Mandela Bay Logistic Park, which is next to Utenac. So instead of the Volkswagen importing parts, so those parts are manufactured there, so as to make sure that we add local content of about 75%, and also to ensure the sustainability of Volkswagen. We also own the Vulindlela Conference Center, that sits about 1,000 people. And yes, we also own the Kocha Hotel, which is Sunrise Hotel, that has got about 52 beds. We've got a small business finance for SMMEs, Kocha Corporate Travel, we've got ICT, that we do it as services. The other aspect is consulting business, which is divided in both in the continental and the domestic. In the continental, we've got a presence in Anglophone, which is Zimbabwe, and Francophone, which is Cameroon, Central African Republic, and DRC, where we've won concessions against the strong European and the Chinese competition. This is where the South Africanness, because one of the things that we found is that they lack those things that are born in Africa. And then we've also got the domestic ones, Eastern Cape, we've got the Department of Education, Department of Health, the DEA, national government, we've got assisting public works, Department of Health, Department of Basic Education, Department of Transport, the non-Eastern Cape provincial entities. We've got a presence in Mpumalanga, Northern Cape, Limpopo, KZN, we also are in negotiation with the Western Cape government. So that is basically what we do to make sure or to ensure our sustainability and our survival. In a sense, you could say that to try to not to depend on government, which has been happening for the past 5 to 10 years. This is the map of the COGA presence in South Africa. The strong offices are in Port Elizabeth, head office is London, Mthatha, Durban, Pretoria, and Cape Town. We also have got a presence in those 3 countries where we are doing quite some work. In terms of the key drivers, I'm not sure whether you can, sorry, you can see the national economic strategy that was adopted on the 27th of May 2020. We have taken it to heart. Those included the infrastructure intervention in industrialization, which also called for the establishment of Infrastructure South Africa that is responsible for blended financing. The same strategy is saying that the state capacity needs to be strengthened by COGA and DBSA. And then it talks about the allocation for bankable business plans. So there is a shift and the recognition that the fiscals cannot accommodate what it used to accommodate before. Therefore, there must be some bankable business plan where the private sector plays a part. On its part, national government will come in as a partner, not as a driver. So the enablers at that there has to be optimum revenue collection. So you can no longer then go to government and ask for them to build water infrastructure. If you can get revenue out of that, the private sector has got to drive. And that is where, from where we are sitting, the industry has got to move on if it is going to survive. Also increase the access to finance using the DFIs. We find that the DFIs, especially in the continent, African Development Bank and even the World Bank, are keen to fund projects that are run by South African companies, because you find that these projects are funded through the Western governments, but the implementation is dominated by the Chinese. So there is a bit of schism in terms of that. So we are the acceptable, when I'm saying we as South Africans are the acceptable compromise. And indeed there is excitement that we're there. And there's also excitement that you tender and you win against the best in the world. So in terms of implementation, we've been involved in the Bishop Bid concession, the Lesotho Highland Water tendering. I've also talked about the Central African republics tendering, where you go, actually, the bankers are not your funders, they are your partners. The consulting engineers are not your service providers, they are your partners. The contractors are not your service provider, they are partners. So you go there and look for such projects, and those projects are worth billions of rands. We also involve in part tendering and bankable business plans through partnership. So it becomes what is in it for us. So the key issue is service and ensuring that the costs are down. So it doesn't become a service to the state, it becomes a service to yourself, because you compete with international and national companies. I just want to give you an example of the bankable business plans that we have submitted. This is just the scan. We had about 30 business plans, but they were all reduced to literally 4 of those, because of the nature of the bankable business plan. That number one, it's got to be a minimum of 1 billion. And then also it must be economically viable. It must be shovel ready. So not every project fits that. And then also you've got to make sure that because the failure rate is 90% and more. So it's the top of the pie. And then you must also market this to a private sector. There must see value in it. So the identification of this becomes 6 of PICC identified, but also you must follow the process, you know, if it's not PICC or SIPS identified. So as I said, that the minimum was 1 billion and 3 billion. Now, out of 28 projects, the success rate to us was the projects that Kucha was doing. And when you look at those projects that Kucha was doing, is that we've developed them over the period of 10 years. So we've had a lot of input in them. The success of the others is that they could not be bankable, primarily because you need an injection of between 5 and 10 million to get through to your stage 3 or 4 of the design, or even 30 million to get through to that level. So for the consulting fraternity to be involved, it's going to be conscious that it is putting an effort, call it a 10 million, 30 million. So the project then must be very attractive because the failure rate is too high. So our project were not shovel ready, but only those that we're doing, because there was emphasis on elaboration over time. There was a problem with the support and engagement by local municipalities on supporting the business case. Your business case is not only the delivery of the project, but it must be run over a period of 30 to 50 years. So the municipality has got to come to the party in some way. There must be bulk water, there must be services, there must be all these things. And then also you must have the entity that's going to run it. So the shovel readiness and the running is a critical issue. So from a government fiscus, I'm just showing this thing for the delivery side. I mean, if you look over there from 2018 to 2024, there hasn't been much of an increase in terms of allocation, or the allocation has not necessarily followed the inflation trajectory. However, despite the fact that the economy is growing at 1%, government has been true to its word of allocating funds. But these funds, I must add that it's no longer the fact that there needs to be a new railway that's being built. You find that it goes to maintenance, which we need to ensure that we, from a consulting fraternity, who are ready in the Eastern Cape, as well as the other provinces, smaller provinces. In my view, we've finished building schools, we've finished building hospitals, we've finished building clinics. What needs is maintenance, because in any way we've got people living for the Western Cape and for the Gauteng and for KZN, which is where the money ought to be. But you can also see that the government has been consistent in terms of funding, but that money largely would go towards maintenance. The consulting fraternity has got to be conscious on the fact that the slice is becoming thinner, although the funding is not necessarily becoming thinner. It's becoming thinner because it's going towards the maintenance, so it's got to adapt. From the Western Cape, it's the same thing. There is a consistency in terms of funding, but you can see there is a gradual increase in funding in the Western Cape compared to the others. Why? Because it is having more people moving towards the Eastern Cape, from Northern Cape, from Eastern Cape, and from elsewhere in South Africa. I just want to deal with this issue. This is a governance issue. This is IDMS. That's where we work. From where we are sitting, those who are familiar with IDMS, where in terms of the identification of the problem is at the planning level. That's where the challenges are sitting. Remember, if you want to build a court, Department of Justice tell Public Works to build a court. But Public Works, you find then that the user needs are not as adequate. So there has to be a backwards and forwards on all those things. When it gets given to an implementing agent, we might be Public Works, so Kucha or DBSA, we've got a duty to check that. But because the initialization of this was about 5 years, you need to check. Then you find that it is becoming a bigger one. The venue is not adequate. I remember of a project where we were asked to go and renovate a project that's worth about 720 a building. But when we arrived, we actually find that there was a thinking that there were 5 people, but those people have grown to 25. So the building was not adequate. So we would go back and say the building is 15 million, everybody got shocked. So we said we need another place. So there is a duty of care in terms of that. But the cycle of making sure that you tick all the dots sometimes becomes 3 to 5 years in terms of it coming back, because it requires a replanning and all that. So where implementing agents sit, they tend to sit at DP2 project management level. But we will be moving, and we're moving straight to operations and maintenance because of the lack of projects there. And I think the consultants got to look at how best to move that. Just I was just taking one project of clients, weighted about 110 projects, and 62 of those were not moving. So you see a lot of challenges and problems from site clearance certificate. This is about done planning, a land acquisition, services problems, backwater and all that, revise the needs assessment. But you find that when the budget is announced, no one has done this kind of work, because it's got to be at a detailed level. Scheduling committee, base specification, national VOs, contractor behind program, final delivery. So in that particular client that I did, that we did work on, is that out of 110, only 62 were at a standstill. Now, these are the issues that the South African Association of Civil Engineers can start to say, where can we help the government? Sometimes it just takes a call. Let me make an example. There's one project that stopped because the Heritage Council was not sitting. When you start to ask, why was it not sitting? But the consultants that were working, they were not paid for about a year. So they decided to stop paying. So this is where stakeholder comes in, because one telephone call to the minister of the HOD would unlock that payment issue. But the project is still not it's still not functional even today. But now that project has moved from being a heritage problem, that the user requirements have grown so much, such that it needs to be started again. Now so these are the kind of challenges where you say public works, but it's not public works. The way you say so the problem then that from this area we have asked government that maybe the consulting or the implementing agents must move from project management to a DP1 to go and assist client departments in planning, because because the projects are not moving from that side. Just in conclusions, Chair, I hope I haven't taken your time. We need to deepen the consulting body and infrastructure department. The relations are critical. It's important that CESA or SACE, they are on a call with infrastructure heads of department and the ministers. There are economic opportunities due to blended funding, concessions. The business that we're in at the moment is dying, and it is going to die. I don't see any way back, not unless you are involved in facilities management. That business is going to boom. So what is becoming clearer is that project must be acceptable to the private sector for it to fund. Relationship with bankers, relationship with institutions. So one doesn't move from being a service provider to being a partner for a period of 30 to 50 years. Experience indicate the need for upfront work to shovel ready. Consultants have got to get into this. We are not going to get away with the fact that we need shovel ready. However, I'm the first one to say that you cannot have consultants subsidizing a 5 million and still lose. But we need to refine that and say that how do we get to BFI so that the private sector can see the projects. So government figures is winning with time, but still relevant. We must strengthen the client role in planning. The strongest, if the client is strong, then things will move. Then also the management of the transfer of funds. Initially, the client has been rejecting this, but they have actually come to accept I think 70% of our clients now are saying that we're going to transfer funds to you instead of paying on a point. So the relationship management is working. Thank you very much, Chair.
Wow, no, thank you very much, Ms. Nambande. Yeah, very excellent presentation. Filled with lots of data and thought-provoking questions. So I hope that our audience today has got a couple of questions for you, because this was very, very interesting, and it's definitely given one, particularly me, something to really think about. As someone who's young, who's trying to grow in the industry and looking into the next 10 to 15 years, 15 and even beyond, what contributions we can make as consulting engineers, towards infrastructure delivery with our fellow national and provincial and local government entities. So I do thank you very much for that, Mr. Mbande. So lastly, or almost lastly, just before the general questions and discussions, I do want to hand over back to Mr. Campbell, just to give us an update on the happenings of CESA, the latest news and events that have occurred or will be occurring. So without further ado, then I'd like to give back to Mr. Campbell. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ahuile. And I'm going to be very brief. I'm mindful of the time. In our industry, the one thing that always resonates true is time is money. So I'm going to be rather brief. I'm not going to deep dive. Just a couple of developments which you will see being made available to members, and please, in your companies, whoever gets information, whoever has access to it, please do share it with those who may not necessarily be on our distribution list yet. So the new public procurement bill, many of us might have recall, it was out for comment in 2020. It had then been tabled at NEDLAC, and through my role and as CESA, as a member of BUSA, I was one of the lead on the part of business. My counterparts from National Treasury and from COSATU, Labour, went through this process for the last 6 months. The NEDLAC report will be shared with members. It is in the public domain. Anybody who wants to go to the NEDLAC website, research and publications, you'll find it there. But the long and the short of it is, this is a negotiation process which I think was unfortunately slightly flawed, because it still is apparent that government is not talking through National Treasury enough, who were the main drivers here. And their approach tended to be focused on just getting legislation drafted and not solving the problem that we all face, public sector and private sector, is the procurement processes. So it's not done and dusted. It's not the end of the road. Where we are at this point in time, at least one major achievement is that, firstly, when this bill is promulgated, all of the legislation in the PFMA and the MFMA will be changed, and all of procurement will come out of that legislation and will be driven through this legislation. And in this particular legislation, categorically, it states that the procurement processes that apply to general goods and services must be different from those for infrastructure development and capital assets and equipment. Now, that's a great move in the right direction when we consider how our infrastructure processes have tended to be considered as a commodity-based approach. And then the other important development in that legislation is that it also states that the minister must publish regulations for infrastructure development specifically. That means, and that gives us the opportunity to use some of the good practices and documents that are already available. I mean, a few years ago, we started on the SIPDM, SIPDM, a very healthy process. It spoke about value for money. That's what's in this new legislation, value for money, not least cost. And it talks about quality, matching quality, value for money with cost, not least cost, regardless of the impact. So I think those are good moves in the right direction as a start. And then some of us might have seen the very lean regulations or the PPPFA being published. It is going to become part of this bill, and we are already now starting to review those regulations. I think the ones that were published just recently were done merely to fill a gap between now and between, you know, at least from the time that the current 2017 version of the Preferential Procurement Framework Act becomes is withdrawn officially, the 2017 version, that is. So there is a move afoot to develop that so that it's a lot more comprehensive, and it doesn't just talk about 80-20 and 90-10. So that's a important development. The next one I'd like to share very quickly is there's another document that's been published. It is available to members. We were also instrumental. I was part of the task team under the then Minister Senzo Mchunu for Public Service Administration. The document is the framework for professionalizing the public sector. And our focus specifically was looking at the technical cadre in public sector. And of course, one can already start seeing the seriousness with which this is being taken, notwithstanding the sometimes confusing and mixed messages around cadre deployment versus competency. But there are questions being asked, and the qualifications as a start of senior managers in public sector are being reviewed to make sure that at least those persons have the right qualifications and experience, because otherwise they are going to frustrate your up and coming engineers in the public sector because you know more than them. And it's an unhealthy, it becomes a toxic environment. So it's important that all the layers have the requisite qualifications and competency. So that's on the part of the public sector. On the private sector side, there is a lot more that needs to be done to professionalize the private sector. And to that extent, CESA is now in stronger discussions with the Competitions Commission so that the identification of engineering work regulations can eventually be promulgated. I think there has to be a recognition that it's not, you know, if you're not going to allow an unregistered doctor to be performing operations, then you shouldn't be allowing an unregistered engineering practitioner to take responsibility. Of course, in the learning process, you're going to be involved in it. But the ultimate responsibility and sign-off has to be by a registered practitioner under all circumstances. Because public health and safety is at risk. And that's not talking even about the public funds that are then compromised. And in the same vein, CESA in its attempts now is also looking at the well-being of both the client and the the private sector provider in working on at least a 2023 version of the professional fee guideline. Now, there's been a massive misunderstanding here around this fee guideline. It's not a holy grail, but at least it gives a client an idea of what is the minimum, and I'm going to say minimum because that's what that guideline is. The numbers that you see there are published as a minimum. And likewise, as a service provider, those are a minimum. And the problem we've opened the Pandora's box as client, as service providers, by discounting from that minimum. And that is why you will see quality of projects being compromised, the ability to absorb young engineers and invest in them. Invest. But in order to invest in them in private sector, in companies, you've got to make some money. But if you've discounted from a minimum, there's no money left to make that investment. So that then throttles the system. And I think both parties need to get back to what is a healthy level. Use that as a minimum guideline, and then negotiate if people come in at higher than that. Because the question should also be is, there should be a minimum. We should be worried when something costs you less than what it should. And that's its purpose. I mean, you don't walk into a Mercedes-Benz dealership and look at the latest E-Class Mercedes-Benz and see the price there of a normal VW Beetle on in the windscreen. And this is brand spanking new, and you think you're getting that quality of Mercedes-Benz? I think we're fooling ourselves. So as a client, clients need to know what things ought to cost, and your professional service providers must then stick to those rules of what things should cost so that we can have a win-win situation. Then, last 2 points I'd like to share with you. I could ramble on and on, but I'm mindful of the time, sorry, is certainly it would be very wise for us to not see the industry and consulting engineering industry as an industry with very deep pockets. And why am I saying that? Because increasingly we're seeing that client bodies are putting unlimited liability in the appointment of consulting engineers. Now, the practice has always been that if your fee is X, then your PI cover is normally about 2 times that or something to that effect, or depending on the scale or magnitude of the project, but it's pegged. But for clients to insist that the liability be unlimited is a fool's paradise, unfortunately, because no insurance company offers that kind of cover. No company will be able to absorb that kind of. So, I mean, if my turnover in my company is 20 million per annum, and suddenly there's a liability that's being slapped on me for 50 million rand, what do? I'm not going to be able to pay it. I may end up being liquidated. Not a problem. I'll just restart the business in another name. As a client, are you better off or worse off? I think you're worse off, because what should actually happen is the client should assume self-insurance for a large component of that risk, and then you transfer some of that risk to your service provider. You cannot transfer all of it, because if you try to do that, invariably you're going to be the loser, because that company has gone into liquidation. Have you gotten your 50 million? No. Turnover is 20 million. Does it necessarily mean that they have assets? No, because assets in consulting engineering companies, people. It's not equipment. It's not buildings. So you will end up with very little. So best we get to that partnership and balance. So with that, colleagues, I'm going to end there, and I'm going to hand back to our moderator, program director, to possibly field a question or two. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell, for that update. And yes, I hope that everyone has, held that to heart and has paid deep attention to that. To please also keep up to date with regards to the emails that get sent by CESA, and also refer to our website, www.cesa.coza, to get more information about these news and developments, as well as to keep up to date with our LinkedIn page, where we also publish these news developments and other social media as well. So to end off, I see that with regards to the questions and discussions, I only see one question under the Q&A box. I just wonder from the control panel, can you confirm or are there more questions, Godfrey?
No, it's only one so far.
Okay, no, that is fine. Let me just flip to it. Yes, so we have a question from Mishak to Mr. Deval. So Mr. Deval, the question is, could highly labor-intensive methods of road construction not assist in job creation in non-revenue or non-economic rural unpaved roads? Oh yeah, I was about to say now you're on mute.
I think my face gave the game away there. Apologies. Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair, and for the question there, Mishak. Very good one. Unfortunately, the answer is not simple. The policy is there to use the gravel road and unpaved road network as a basis to generate work through highly intensive labor construction. The point is that that policy is often not taken through a planning and design process to get an engineered solution. So as many times we hear is that South African, so good policy makers, we aren't very good at our implementation. So we need to have regional specific solutions to specific problems in order to address it. And it starts off with the engagement of the community early on in that. The rural network of the Western Cape is very different to other parts of the country, where our gravel roads connect nodes of towns. So you often have to, excuse the term, ship in labor in order to do work and then ship back. So it doesn't become economic. To change the spin-off is that we should perhaps look at strategic upgrades, and through the upgrades, reduce the maintenance requirement on the gravel road network. Because the key bottleneck there is the availability of gravel wearing cores, and that has to go through something like 14 sets of legislation in order to get a bottle pit and material that meets the technical needs and the needs. So it is a very complex matter. And then the second aspect is that there's also a need for a paradigm shift in how the client and state authority thinks. And it touches on very well on what Mr. Campbell spoke about there of unlimited liability and sharing of the risk. We can't continue to design roads at 1970s standards when vehicles have improved. The purpose of a road has improved. We need to use our policy and engineer a solution and not, excuse my bastardization of the term here, and not just a copy and paste where all solutions fits all problems. Thanks.
All right. No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deval. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate that. I think, can I also pose that question to Mr. Mbande, if it's applicable under the CDC, whether, for labor intensive measures within Kucha, could you also comment on that, but not specifically on unpaved roads, but on your other infrastructure related projects, such as, the CD program?
Thank you very much. Yes, the labor-intensive methods, from my perspective, have got to be integrated. I think at the beginning of 2000, we were talking about dedicated labor-intensive, but I think they've been included as part and parcel of a road design and implementation as a rule. I'm making an example. We had a heavy carriage road that goes to the port. Those who know Professor Murchison, who was at VETS, the guru on labor intensive, we brought him in to do value engineering, which is a critical element now in every design. We had to shift from to a macadam that was much more intensive in terms of work. So this is in my view, a compulsory aspect. It's no longer there are labor-intensive roads, or there are no labor-intensive roads, or there are labor-intensive work, there is no labor-intensive work. It's integrated. I think there is enough within the South African guidelines and specification that dictate that. Thanks, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Mande. Yes, I really appreciate your feedback on that. For me as well, it's a question I want to pose, my personal question I want to pose to both you, Mr. Mande, and Mr. Duval. Both of your institutions have graduate programs. So what I want to find out with regards to that, like how can, what advice would you give both consulting engineers as well as your fellow provincial, national, and municipal and state-owned entities, on how to create such programs, successful programs that would, continue the rolling out of young people who could positively contribute towards, long sustainable infrastructure delivery within in our country for many years to come. We can start with you, Mr. Mande, and then we can go to Mr. Duval. Thank you.
To us, Chair, there is two levels at which we involve. We involve it at the tendering stage, because we also require consultants that were employed to have one or two interns, depending on the projects, on how big the projects are. For instance, we just completed the 3.5 billion Ford Park in Mamelodi, which is Pretoria, purchasing the new generation Ford Ranger. So where these were specified, you find that you could easily put about 25 of those, both at the contractor and the consultant level. Now that project had about, give or take, about 14 factories. So one of the biggest, the Ford, that was delivered. So when you deliver the product, you also deliver interns as part and parcel of that tendering process. So that is the first level. The second level, there is a program that was conceptualized last year, but this is over a 5-year period where we take 30 top of the crop people. We take them to the best universities in the world, Germany, Japan, America, you're top of the crop. They go through a process. So out of the 30 that applied, only 2 we managed to send them. Actually, they left in September. One in Germany, I think the other one to Singapore, also where we pay the fee. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to create a new generation of leadership, not only at a technical level, because at that level, you take somebody who is around about 25, 30 already completed, but you just give that person the edge, and then you pay the institutions, the fees, the flights, and then you guarantee that person work, because you want to continue with your top of the crop leadership within the institution, and also within South Africa in doing that. So I think this year, next year, we're also going to apply. We apply nationally. For instance, it's not necessarily the Eastern Cape people. These people that we sent, none of them came from the Eastern Cape. And then one was 35 years old. I think one was 40 years old, already in their profession. But it's a top of the crop, because you want to create the leadership, a leadership that you want to take this country in 10 to 20 years, not only at Kocha, but throughout South Africa. Thanks, Shane.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Mbande. Yes, very insightful answer on that. So yeah, no, definitely, thank you for that. Mr. Duval, and your answer to that?
Yes, just to build on what the final panelist, Mr. Mbande, is saying there, is that the state needs to create certainty and incentives in order for that to happen. You could argue that we perhaps do a too heavy top-down approach, where there's too many engineers and not enough, so too many people that think and not enough people that do. So there needs to be a balance there, and there needs to be a long-term plan. In terms of the Western Cape government's road branch approach, those things are in place, and those things are available. But to make an admission on our part is, if you are employing someone on contract that incurs a salary towards the state, and you are deploying that out to a private sector individual, what is the state's return on that in the short to medium term? Or are you waiting for that person to take 5 to 6 years to register and then run the risk of them losing? So it comes back to that sort of economic model, and you know the general issue in terms of pressures on the wage. In terms of the work that we do, we have a dedicated program that has a look at that through our commitment and undertaking with EXA. And perhaps to call out EXA on that is that how often do they do reviews and spot checks on these commitments and undertaking? That's one aspect I'd like to raise. And then secondly, we aren't going to make professional registration important. Most people in the private sector do not see worth in a candidate registration with EXA. What you get back from that 4,000 Rand per year, more or less, that you pay. So there needs to be a combined approach. And in terms of the words said by Mr. Campbell, is voluntary associations need to play a more active role in this, and start putting pressure on decision makers to change things. Lastly, we focus on a lot of our technical competence, but as I would like to think myself as a fairly young professional still, what emphasis do we put on the metrics of how you measure someone's personal attributes? There are often stories on our program, you know, some candidates turn around and say, I work for the client. I'm going to work till 5 and go home. So that's not the type of attitude we'd like to create. And how do you measure that? How do you make sure the person that you employ for that purpose carries the ethos of leadership, so that we develop active citizens and not engineers just for the sake of design. So it is a complex one. I never gave a direct or explicit answer, but I think that's the important thing. We need to have these difficult, robust discussions, and through that, I'm sure that we were able to come with solutions that work and work for the people. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. we really appreciate that. And yeah, it's definitely food for thought. Again, more thought-provoking. And yeah, I think even from my side, from a YPF perspective, Young Professionals Forum, I think it's definitely something that I can address or relay to my fellow young professionals in the industry, so that we can try and pave a way for what type of environment within consulting that we want to create in order to assist people like yourselves in your industry, in the public sector, to try and reach the overarching goals of as well as with the theme of this year, the call to service and proper service delivery. So thank you very much once again. So in closing, I just want to send a thank you to everyone who's attended today. I also would like to thank Mr. Campbell, for his continued support, towards the branches, as well as the YPs. We see him all the time in our YP events, so thank you very much, sir. I'd like to thank Godfrey, and the team at CESA head office for making this webinar possible. And I'd like to thank Mr. Deval and Mr. Mbande for taking time off your busy schedules to be here with us today. As I've mentioned, your presentations have been very thought-provoking. They've been very interesting, and I think it's definitely given something for everyone in attendance today to really think about and look and try to envision or try to envision a new strategy to send our industry forward. Yes, and our presentations will be available on our CESA website. So that's again www.cesa.co.za, and you'll find that under the presentations tab. Last but not least, please again, go to our social media sites. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and yes, to keep yourself up to date with regards to the happenings in and around CESA. And with that being said, I'd like to thank everyone today. Please take care, and yeah, let's continue making South Africa great from an infrastructure perspective. Wish you all a very good afternoon and all the best in your workplaces. Thank you.